Hi, I'm John Byrne with Poets and Quants. We're here for a fireside chat, although there's no fire, with the great Anjani Jain. Now, those of you who don't know Anjani, you should. He is a deputy dean for academic programs at Yale. He had been the acting dean at Yale when Ted Snyder took a one-year sabbatical. He was part of the all-star leadership team that Ted Snyder brought with him to Yale SOM. I know Anjani back to his days at Wharton. He spent 26 years at Wharton. He ran the MBA program. He ran the executive MBA program. He was a real wizard at Wharton, and he went to Wharton right after getting his PhD at UCLA in operations research. Anjani, welcome.
Thank you, John. It's wonderful to connect with you again, and thank you so much for this over-generous introduction.
I'm understating your achievements and your knowledge. I'm going to tell everyone right now, there is an inner game of graduate management education, and one of the masters of the inner game is Anjani. He is a wizard at deciphering all kinds of analyses from data on MBA programs, and seriously is one of a handful of people in the world who know more about the MBA landscape and how each school competes against each other than anyone else. And it's really
that's
true.
Very kind. Very kind, John.
So Yale has been on one heck of a momentum ride. And part of that is your doing under Ted Snyder. When you look at all the more prominent schools in the world, Yale has the best momentum story in the last 10 years, no doubt about it. And yes, it's in part reflected in rankings because the school has done exceptionally well in the rankings game. But let's face it, the rankings are flawed. They don't capture everything. More importantly, I think it's captured in application volume, the numbers of people who are applying to Yale SOM for an MBA seat based on the classroom seats that you have, the underlying raw stats of the class that compete with the very best of the best. How do you think that happened?
So first thing I should say, John, is that I think Yale School of Management has always been, I would say, right from the inception, a stellar institution. But because the start of the institution was somewhat unorthodox, as you know, there has been a lag between reality and reputation. And some of what you have stated is simply the catching up of the reputation with the reality.
That's true. And we should explain how it was unorthodox. First off, no MBA degree.
Yes.
It was an unusual degree.
It was. I sometimes mention to prospective students that Yale School of Management is the last major school of management to be founded in the US. It was founded as late as the bicentennial of the United States, 1976, a year that came 275 years after the birth of this great and old university. So it's an interesting juxtaposition of a new school of management being founded at a very old established university. And the founding came after almost 2 decades of intense debate among the trustees and the faculty about what kind of an institution it should be. And that debate has turned out to be consequential to the founding mission of the institution, which has remained invariant, though the school has, of course, evolved. And so it was founded with a mission to educate leaders for business and society. And so the mission endowed the institution with this sort of broader sense of purpose of business education, a reminder of its deep embedding in the broader social fabric. And I think it has been a sense of calling to all of us who are attracted to the institution as faculty, students, or staff. But the degree, as you pointed out in the beginning, was not an MBA. It was a new kind of a degree called the Master of Public and Private Management.
Yes.
And it was not until the mid-90s that it was converted to an MBA. a decision that at the time was quite controversial because to some of our alums, it represented, they feared an abandonment of the founding mission. But what was always true, going back to the inception, is that in all of the traditional disciplines of business, whether it's finance, operations, marketing, accounting, the school had always been extremely strong, as you would expect of a faculty at Yale. So it was always a full-fledged business school. In fact, if you looked at the career paths of graduates, they often started in for-profit and made a transition to not-for-profit or vice versa. But it always was a strong business school. And I think during Dean Snyder's leadership of the school, there was a very effective reinforcement of the founding mission of the school, its deep embedding within the university's intellectual fabric, and of a very strong aspiration to globalize. And I think those elements helped the school gain greater prominence. And we were truly delighted to experience the kind of changes that you mentioned in terms of the caliber of applicants applying. But the school, I think, was always extremely small. I mean, extremely high caliber, but small. And that, I think that has continued to be true.
Right. And, you know, and there have been a number of, well, you mentioned the evolution of the school, and parts of it were tumultuous. I recall one dean, I think his name was Michael Levine, who, you know, stirred up quite a bit of controversy. In fact, so much so that at graduation, the alumni hired a plane with one of those flags of protest flying above the commencement.
That's true. The folklore and the legend of those years is still very much alive. I wasn't here during that time, but I did note from the outside a somewhat strange decision to limit the school's intellectual breadth to essentially just economics, to make it an applied school of applied economics. And I think, luckily for the school and its future evolution, that phase was very short. And I think, but the echoes of that period, as well as some of the scars, I think might still exist.
And in the past 10 years, what we've seen is, as you pointed out, tripling down on globalization,
right?
Trying to make Yale SOM the most global of all the US schools. We've seen brand new, fantastic facility to house the school, which is a huge plus over the small kind of row houses that have been scattered across different streets at the university. Doubling down on entrepreneurship as well, big investments there. The other really big bet, frankly, was the addition of a new master's program and the global network, and drawing students from that global network into this master's program to mix the students in a way to get incredible diversity. And really, I think more than any other school, embracing the broader university. I mean, Yale, the Yale brand is one of the greatest brands in all of higher education, and yet SOM as a school, like many business schools, remained isolated from its broader university brethren. And I think that there's been a true embrace of all that the university offers, both incoming and outgoing, because you have a lot of graduate students who now take courses at Yale. And bring their added diversity into the classroom. And you have a lot of MBAs who avail themselves of the tremendous intellectual assets throughout that university. And that's really special.
Yeah, John, I just have to say, I'm so impressed with your depth of knowledge of the institution. I couldn't have said better what you said to describe the school's evolution in the last few years. Just to pick up on a couple of observations.
Yes.
I, first of all, agree very strongly that those changes you highlighted have been very consequential to the school's growing prominence. It also makes complete sense at a place like Yale, where boundaries, intellectual boundaries, departmental, administrative boundaries are so much easier to cross, at least compared to my previous experience. And students come in feeling very proud of their association with the entire university, which, as you know, is very prominent. And this is a point I sometimes mention to students, that in the long run, what creates and sustains an institution's luminosity and reputation is essentially two kinds of things. One is the knowledge that gets created and the impact it has around the world. And the second is the reflected glory of our alumni's achievements that directly shines back on us. And in both respects, Yale, I think, has been exemplary. I may have mentioned the story. The first week I came to campus, I walked around a famous old cemetery called Grove Cemetery. And in it, by chance, I encountered the grave of J. Willard Gibbs, who, it turns out, was the first professor of theoretical physics to be appointed.
And I should tell everyone that your undergraduate degree was in physics.
Yeah, so as you know, so what I was going to say was that years ago, growing up in the small towns of India, I had known about Gibbs as the founder of statistical thermodynamics, you know, the second law of thermodynamics and so on. I had no idea that he had spent all his life in New Haven, went to Yale College, did his PhD here. And it reminded me that that's what creates the aura that we associate with these great institutions. It's that they have been founts of knowledge that has made an impact around the world. So it feels very privileged, and I feel very grateful for the opportunity to be associated with an institution during years of tremendous growth and momentum.
Anjani, I'm betting that serendipitous encounter with that gravesite made you think you were in the right place.
It did. And though I didn't have the caliber to pursue physics, I'm hoping that one of my daughters who is pursuing physics will carry on.
So what do you think makes the Yale SOM experience special for people who are privileged enough to get in and enjoy it?
Yeah, it's something that, you know, I never experienced myself as a student, and yet having lived among students and faculty for much of my professional life, I do think that institutions have distinct cultures. First of all, there are just so many wonderful, great institutions, almost regardless of their ranking. But I think it truly is a privilege to be able to study at a place like Yale School of Management, to be a member of Yale University. You are immediately struck by the tradition and the weight of expectations that is placed upon you for this privilege. And I think it propels people to rise to their highest potential. It creates an environment of excellence, just almost through osmosis. You feel driven to be at your best. And for those of us who are privileged to be amongst this group of really amazingly talented and gifted students, it feels very alive. You know, I delude myself that I'm not aging, and it's partly because I'm surrounded by all these wonderful, bright people and young people. But to your question as to what is distinct, so much of what I said, I think, is true for all of the great institutions. The culture here, I think, is distinct in a few ways. One is the degree to which students take an interest in and have a respect for the intellectual part of the enterprise that faculty are pursuing, the research, Sometimes, especially in professional business programs, students don't always see the relevance of research. They sometimes see it as a more self-interested pursuit by faculty. And here, I think there is just a greater appreciation of the value of that enterprise. Faculty, in turn, are actually quite insistent on engaging students with that sort of frontier research enterprise. They bring more of the current articles into the classroom. So there is a healthy, I think, appetite for the intellectual part of the enterprise. The second thing I would say is that there's a lot less of a sense of the student's relationship with the university being that of a customer with a vendor. Mm-hmm. In some ways, students are customers, but the relationship of a student to an institution has many other aspects as well. They are, in some ways, they have the deepest stake in the long term in the reputation of the institution. So they are able to have a broader perspective of what their relationship is to the customer, to the institution. So one thing that helps here is that the tuition for the program, as expensive as it is actually a fairly small fraction of the cost of operating the university. At the university level, this is remarkably low. It's, I think, second only to Princeton, which doesn't have too many graduate schools. But if you look at this as public information, the university's budget is about $4.3 billion a year, of which only about 9.3% comes from all of the tuition and room and board. So one way to think of it is that our presence here has been enabled to a very large extent by the generosity of those who've come before us. That's what the accumulated endowment represents, of course, with the kind of astounding management of that endowment by David Swenson and his team. That's, of course, made a huge contribution. But
legendary David
legendary
yeah.
Manager of the endowment. So I think our students coming in are very conscious of this privilege, that and what it enables the institution to do is to have a student-faculty ratio that you will find to be the lowest, if not among the very lowest, across all US institutions. And that results in a couple of things for the student. One of which is that it enables us to teach an integrated curriculum by putting a faculty resource that vastly exceeds, I think, other institutions. Teams of faculty, multiple faculty involved with the course. And the second thing it does is it makes the faculty much more interested and much more willing to take an interest in the students' professional aspirations, their personal lives. And so that creates a culture that is, I think, quite unique. I'm giving you a very long-winded answer, but
it's a very good one. A very good one. And when I walk the halls of your school, I feel good. Now, I don't know how to better describe that, but I actually feel like very much at home. So there's academic rigor. There's tremendous intellectual power in those halls, but there's also a friendliness, an openness, an accessibility that people bring. And I think your students are terrific that way.
Thank you.
I really are. I mean, they're very sharing, and they'll introduce themselves automatically. They'll engage in conversations very easily. You very much feel at home, even the first time you walk in the building and walk the different halls. And it's really an amazing experience. Yeah. Now, Anjani, you still teach, right?
I do. I teach one of the required courses.
Because I know you never really wanted to give up as
I didn't.
administrator for quite a few years.
Yeah, no, I've always seen myself as an educator, and the classroom is a space where there is an unalloyed joy to engaging students. So, that's sort of at the core of what we do. And so I've been privileged to teach a core course essentially all of my academic career. And so the course I teach is actually an interesting example of the way in which we integrate across disciplines. The title is not particularly sexy. It's called Modeling Managerial Decisions. And my portion of the course is more or less what I used to teach previously. It's about how to make decisions in the face of uncertainty, make decisions under multiple constraints. And there are mathematical ideas that have proven to be useful in framing those questions and when you have the right data to make optimal decisions and such. So that's my my academic specialty. But the unusual thing about the course is that I co-teach it with one of our preeminent behavioral psychologists, Nathan Nemensky, who studied at Princeton under Danny Kahneman. And he brings to this course the behavioral aspects of decision making to contrast with my normative or prescriptive approach. And he points out, many different ways in which human intuition, human judgment is led astray by overconfidence, misperceptions, all kinds of biases. So we weave a path together. The students, I think, in the beginning are unsure where this is all going to go. But I think in the end, they appreciate this duality of perspective.
I'm sure. And I should point out that in the time that you've been there, there's a very famous faculty member who has a joint appointment in your economics department and your business school, who has won a Nobel.
Yes. There's been a second one too, Bill Nordhaus.
And behavioral economics is a strong point of the economics department and is brought in SOM as well. And that has been a very hot academic field in the last 15 years.
Yeah. This actually struck me, John, soon after I came, how strong the groups are, not just in the economics subfield, but in behavioral finance, behavioral marketing. That's truly a huge strength among the faculty. And I'm not sure how well prospective students know of that. There are, of course, other amazing areas of strength. So one thing that is not well known is the extent to which we've been able to attract faculty. So the stats you mentioned about the school's momentum and growth are all true, and we are very proud of them. One that is less well known is our success in attracting preeminent faculty. And it was in one of these student sessions that I was asked, I had been going on like this, talking about the school's past and so on. And the student stopped me and said, so you talked about the past, the present. What do you think of the school's future? So I said, that's a good question. And I said, I think the school's future is bright. And I paused, letting her think that was my complete answer. And then I said, I could go on like this, telling you things that you would expect a dean to say, but let me give you a different answer. And I then pointed out that just in the previous 4 years, we managed to attract to our faculty recently tenured preeminent professors in finance, in economics, from places like Chicago and Wharton. And we had, I didn't say this, but we also managed to keep many of our faculty whom other institutions were trying to attract.
Sure, and that's as important as recruiting.
That's just as important. And so if you look at our finance group, I would say it's absolutely among the very, very best in the country.
Yes.
So that's perhaps not as well known. And what I said to the student was, when faculty choose to come here, they are making a long-term bet on the institution. Mm-hmm. They have the ability to go, especially the kind of faculty we attracted. They could go anywhere. The fact that they chose to come here should give you a signal about the school's future. Much better than anything I could say.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And my goodness, over the last, well, 8 years since you've been there,
It's been
running the MBA show entirely, I imagine
no,
that.
no, with an amazing group of colleagues, John.
Yeah, wait,
I can
well,
I can say that I've never had a team as amazing as the one I currently have.
that's great to hear. So, Anjani, if you had to think of a few words that would describe what a student, an MBA student, is like at Yale SOM, what are the words that come to mind?
These are always tough questions for me. I'll just begin by thinking aloud. Of course, they are talented in many dimensions, intellectually, but perhaps even more so in the passion they bring to their pursuits. There is a sense of calling they have about whatever pursuits they engage in. Then I would say they are open-minded. They are intellectually open-minded. They are immensely diverse.
Yeah.
In terms of their antecedents, origins, what they have studied before, what they wish to do post MBA. I would say that there is this sense of obligation they also carry. I think they understand what a privilege it is. The fact that we can have access to institutions like Yale already says a lot about our antecedents, and it's clear to not just to people like me who grew up in the third world, but to, I think, everyone else around me, that to be at an institution like this one is a special privilege. So there is an awareness of that and a certain humility that goes with it. And I think that's an important quality as well. And then they are sort of fun. They are, they do so many things that I just marvel at the energy and the dynamism and the sort of, and the sense of humor they bring.
Yes,
well.
totally. And the other thing I will say is that I believe that SOM, more than any other MBA program in the world, brings in more people from the social sector by far than any program.
I think that's true.
Yeah. And so even beyond this generation's concern for society, for doing good in the world, you're bringing into the mix an overabundance of people who have already demonstrated that through their earlier work experience.
Yeah.
That doesn't really exist at any other school. And I think that does put into the culture a kind of different feeling and a different thinking, like thinking about others immediately, not yourself.
Yeah, you're absolutely right to point that out. And I think it was Ted Snyder who said it this way, which resonates with me a lot, that the school's mission has always been the same. It's remained invariant. But in some ways, perhaps the younger generation, the world at large, has come closer to that mission. And you're right that we attract a unique group of students who perhaps wouldn't really seriously consider other places to do a master's degree in management. So that part certainly is true. I think they also carry this aspiration through their professional careers, even if they don't immediately start out in a nonprofit setting.
Right.
And I was thinking that, in this singular moment in our generation, in the last 100 years, perhaps, with this pandemic raging around us, it's revealed a few things to be much more acute, perhaps, than most of us realize. The frayed seams of our society, the staggering growth and inequality that we have as a nation in many parts of the world allowed to grow. And the pandemic will have a finite end. It will have caused untold devastation to human life and to economies. But there will be a world to rebuild after that. And I think our students who have this privilege of the education now will have this opportunity and the responsibility to rebuild so much of what is broken.
Mm.
And so that too is a privilege in many ways, as daunting as the challenge may currently seem. I think in many ways, this is the time to invest in that foundation upon which they will build their entire professional careers.
That's why I think it's a great time to go to graduate school and to experience how special a world-class MBA is.
Right.
I think in 2 years' time, when we can look back on this
Right.
as a trying time,
Right.
we're going to also think about all the lessons we've
Yes.
learned and the resilience we have.
Right.
And people who go in, over these next couple of years, your faculty are going to take what we're going through and use it to draw so many interesting lessons.
Absolutely.
It will be a great teaching moment in the history of business education, I think.
Yes, one from which we will continue to draw lessons.
Yeah.
For a long time to come.
And given your modeling on decision making in ambiguous situations, you are very well placed to make very tough decisions in a time of tremendous uncertainty.
Yeah, no, I hope one of the things our students take from the course like mine is a degree of humility about what we can encompass in models or our thinking. There is a great deal of humility that goes with learning, mastering some of the skills that we can teach.
And there's what we can control and what we can't control.
Yeah.
And we can control our values.
Yes.
We can control our integrity. We can control our thirst for learning.
Yes.
Embracing others, even at a time when so many other things are elusive to us.
That's well put, John.
Yeah. So Anjani, one last thing. What's your advice to someone who has been thinking about Yale SOM and will apply? What do you tell them? It's a hard time to just come to campus and have a few beers with students and sit in a class and walk those halls and see those young people and see the dedicated faculty and absorb the culture of a world-class institution that Yale is. What's your advice?
So it's true that coming to campus and interacting with the community, I think, is often an indelible impression on students who have been admitted or who are prospective students. But I think that in many ways, the community really does extend beyond the campus borders, and any chance that a prospective student or an admitted student has to connect with an alum, a current student, one of us on the faculty, I think I would very strongly urge them to make the effort. We, on our part, do try to reach out. Our Dean Charles has been very effective reaching out to admitted students to just engage them in a conversation. And students who are admitted, who have the caliber to be admitted to places like Yale, often have amazingly good options. And it behooves them to really get a sense of how the institutional culture might be different, what might appeal to them. The point I made earlier about this being the last formal educational experience they will have makes it, I think, that much more important that they pick carefully. But I hope that all prospective students and admitted students feel more than welcome to reach out to me, to all of my colleagues, and to our students. I think in many ways, they are the extended reach of the institution.
True.
Much more effective than what we can achieve from within our small team.
Really true. Anjani, what a pleasure it's been to see you again.
It's my pleasure.
Really.
Thank you so much for...
I just want to say,
Yeah.
Yale SOM has been the beneficiary of having 3 deans, not one. Anjani, David Bach, who's now leaving for IMD in Switzerland, Ted Snyder, who's now retired and has been succeeded. But really, you know, SOM is the only school in the world that has had 3 people who are more than capable of running any school, whether it be Harvard, Stanford, NCI, London, any school in the world, all 3. And no one can say that about any other school in the world, probably in the history of management education. I kid you not, that's not hyperbole.
You're always very kind, John, but I do want to point out one thing. Ted remains on our faculty. So his counsel, and I think once you have a chance to meet Dean Charles, you will find him incredibly charismatic, visionary, and I know we'll work out time for the 2 of you to chat. I was just a substitute. He couldn't make today's call.
Well, it's my distinct pleasure to see you again. So Anjani, thank you for your time and your help. And for all of you out there, thank you for watching and listening. And if you do get a chance to go to SOM, knock on Anjani's door. Even though he is frightfully busy, and his family will tell you that he's way too devoted to school, he will find time for you. I know that to be the truth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All.